Laws, where they come from, also the hierarchy of law. This is PowerPoint number 3, the hierarchy of law, specifically Module 2. This will cover the specific concept of the hierarchy of law. Now we will look more carefully at the concept of the hierarchy of law. What happens if laws conflict? It can happen. Lots of different people are making lots of different laws, particularly over time. The hierarchy of law solves this problem, because if laws conflict, the law higher in the hierarchy controls. That is, notice constitutional law is at the top, and so the constitutional law of whatever jurisdiction you are talking about would control over the statutes in that jurisdiction and the regulations in that jurisdiction and the case law in that jurisdiction that does not deal with a constitution. In the federal court system, that is in the federal jurisdiction, U.S. constitutional law is at the top. It controls over federal statutes control over federal regulations, and federal case law is at the bottom. Remember that U.S. constitutional law consists of not only the words in the U.S. Constitution, but the many cases that have interpreted that Constitution. State constitutional law, which again consists of the words in the state constitution and the many cases that have interpreted the state constitution, controls over state statutes, which controls over state regulations, which controls over state case law that does not deal with a constitutional issue. One more hierarchy does exist. It is rarely used. The most commonly used hierarchies are those on the prior page. This hierarchy is only used in the rare situation when there is a claim that some state law violates the minimum standards set by the U.S. Constitution on the member states. This hierarchy is as you see in the picture below. U.S. constitutional law controls over state constitutional law, over state statutes, over state regulations, and state case law. Again, this hierarchy only applies when the state law violates one of the minimum standards set by the U.S. Constitution on the members of the Federation. As with most things, it's much easier to see this with some examples. Let's take a look at the hierarchy of state law at work. Assume a court in Arizona says that under the common law of Arizona, a person who stops at an accident scene has no legal duty to help anyone at the scene of the accident. Later, the Arizona State Legislature passes a statute that says all persons involved in a vehicular accident must stop and render aid. Question: what two laws are battling in this example? The answer is the common law of Arizona and the statute of Arizona. When confronted with a problem like this, many students think that the law that was made first controls. However, this is not the case. If that were so, then laws could never change. In addition, you should know that the hierarchy between the U.S. law and state law does not control here because this law has nothing to do with the U.S. Constitution and therefore is not under federal control. The issue here is which law controls. The common law, no need to stop, or the statute, must stop. The answer is the statute. Why? Answer: statutes control over cases in the hierarchy of state law. True or false? The hierarchy of law says the first law always controls. Answer: false. True or false? The hierarchy of law says law higher in the hierarchy controls. Answer: true. Pause and answer these true or false questions. Example involving a state statute violating the minimum standards set by U.S. constitutional law on the member states of the Federation. The state legislature of Texas passes a criminal law statute that says, basically, you cannot burn a United States or Texas state flag except to dispose of a worn or torn flag. This was done to prevent protesters from burning flags at protests. Protester is arrested by Texas police for burning a U.S. flag at a protest rally and is being tried in a Texas court for that crime. The protester claims that this state statute violates his right to free speech, guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, and asks the court to nullify the state statute against burning flags. A court agrees with the protester. The case against the protester is dismissed. This example involves a fight between two laws. What are the two laws that are battling? Answer: the Texas statute versus the First and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. True or false? U.S. constitutional law places minimum standards on what types of laws state governments can make. Answer: true. This is an example of U.S. constitutional minimum standards versus state law. U.S. Constitution always wins because it is above state law in the hierarchy of law. Review questions. Hierarchy of law. Which law controls, U.S. constitutional law or the Texas state statute that says you cannot burn? Answer: U.S. constitutional law, specifically the right of free speech, which is guaranteed to the residents of the United States in the U.S. Constitution. Why? U.S. constitutional law controls over state statutes and regulations that violate the minimum standards set for state governments in the U.S. Constitution and the cases that interpret the U.S. Constitution, that is, U.S. constitutional law. You are told this case was decided by a Texas state trial court. Could this case be appealed up to the Texas Supreme Court? Answer: yes. Could this case be further appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court? Answer: yes. Why or why not? This case involves an issue of federal law, specifically the First and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, and how they control actions of the member states, such as Texas.